marks 2 years with this, the Leica M6. Has it lived up to expectations? Has it been a bit of a love story? Or has it just been a bit of an all-round disappointment? And is it just a little bit overhyped? Since picking this camera up about 2 years ago, it's been my most used film camera. It's kind of the default, the camera that I turn to when I know I want to shoot film. It's been used for just about everything from kind of documenting holidays, birthdays, travel, days out, to just plain messing around as well, just shooting it for a bit of enjoyment. I tried to work out earlier how many rolls of film I've shot through this camera, and I think we're somewhere near 40-50 rolls at this point, so it kind of works out over 2 years. I've been shooting a roll of film kind of once every 2 weeks. Let me ask you one question, and I think the answer to this one question will set the tone for the rest of this video. That is, why do you take photos? Why do you shoot photos in the first place? Because I think the answer to that question is one of the big deciding factors on whether you'll like this camera or kind of even understand its purpose. If it's because you enjoy the craft of photography, you like the experience, it's all about the process, it's all just for enjoyment, then I think this camera might make an awful lot of sense to you. And for me, that's exactly what photography is. It's enjoyment, it's fun, it's a hobby. I don't make much money from it, it's all about my personal enjoyment, and I think it's for that reason that this camera, even 2 years later, is still my dream camera. It's my favourite camera that I own, and if I was to lose all my cameras, it's probably the first camera I'd look to replace. So let's kick off with the things that I do like. I think one of the main things that I can remember when buying this camera new was getting it through the post, opening all the packaging, opening the Leica box, and picking the camera up for the first time. Now, you'll hear it a lot and people wax pretty lyrically about these cameras, but the build quality and feel of this camera is so nice. I'm a bit of a sucker when it comes to things like nice engineering and just kind of that whole well-built side of things. Like, some people don't value that so much. It's something that I really do value. Just getting a hold of this, kind of turning the dials, everything clicks nicely, and it's a bit cliche, but yeah, the shutter does sound pretty good. It does sound good, doesn't it? And kind of just like the mechanical feeling of this camera. And it's kind of silly things like that, but that kind of leads a little bit more into the enjoyment for me. Like, it feels like a bit of a tool that's been very well engineered. Just the kind of feel of the camera makes me want to use it. It would have been about 3 years ago that I picked up my Leica M240 now. So there was kind of a year where I had the M240 before I hopped on and bought an M6. In that year, that's when I kind of got used to using a rangefinder, and for me, I found that using a rangefinder is a lot of fun. The viewfinder on this camera is the 0.72 viewfinder, so it's really good for up to kind of 28mm in terms of width when it's just a full viewfinder, and it's still quite comfortable to use for 50mm. I'm definitely glad that was the viewfinder I went for. Some of the others just really wouldn't have suited my style. But in terms of the actual rangefinder itself, it's quite hard to know what side of the fence you're going to sit on in terms of whether you enjoy it or whether you don't like it until you've tried it, really. When I first bought my M240, I didn't have a clue whether I was going to like it or not. It was only having used it for a few weeks that I really started to kind of gel with it. So the viewfinder on this little guy is awesome, and I really like the 0.72 mag that I've got on it. And talking about manual focusing, because obviously these cameras don't have autofocus, so the manual focus is all to do with you. Quite a lot of the lenses come with a little tab on the bottom. And when it comes to focusing, it's definitely an art, and you get an awful lot better at it over time, and it feels quite natural to me now. I'm used to kind of the focus throw. Now, what I would say is a lot of the focusing enjoyment does depend on the lenses. Some of the lenses, especially if they don't have the finger tab on the bottom, are quite hard to focus, and it kind of does retract some of the enjoyment from it. I use a lot of Voigtlander lenses, and lenses like the Ultron that I've got on here, absolutely fine. It feels smooth, and it's got a focusing tab. I do also own a 50mm Nocton lens that has kind of like a focusing ring. It's like a notched ring. That does remove some of the enjoyment in shooting with it, because you have to kind of grab the ring and twist it, and it's kind of stiff. During my ownership, I've generally had a mix of Voigtlander and Leica lenses. So when I first bought this camera, I had a little collection of Leica lenses, and they were very good, very expensive. But I ended up selling them lenses a while back because I thought I was going to move away from Leica as a whole, because I was going to move away from them from a digital point of view. Decided that I was just going a bit mad and had a funny 5 minutes, and then decided, you know what, I'm actually going to stick with this. So I went and bought some Voigtlander lenses. Now, the Voigtlander lenses are quite literally often about 1/5 of the price, but don't let that put you off. Voigtlander, Zeiss, 7 Artisans as well, they're all making very good lenses at the minute that to be honest, do somewhat rival the Leica lenses. The Leica lenses are generally still the best ones, but you really do have to pay for them. My personal view is the Voigtlanders are exceptional, but I think long term I am looking at moving back to Leica lenses. Something else that I absolutely love about this camera and leads to me using it all of the time is its size. It's a pretty small camera. Yeah, it's quite heavy, but the shape of it actually means it fits into camera bags really easy. As long as your camera bag is kind of this wide, when you slot it into a camera bag, it actually takes up so little room. You can quite easily pack the M6 and 2 lenses into really, really small bags, and that on its own leads to me taking this camera pretty much everywhere I go. If we're going on any trip, it's like, let's pack the Leica because I know it's small. But let's have a little chat about the disadvantages then of this camera. Now, one of the ones that I wouldn't say annoys me, but something that, especially of a camera of this price, that it doesn't feature is shutter speed. So this camera can shoot up to 1,000th of a second. So don't get me wrong, it's no slouch, but the lenses, Leica lenses, some of the Voigtlander lenses are all calibrated to be shot wide open. They're pinpoint sharp at their widest settings. So it makes you want to shoot wide, but then when you've only got 1,000th of a second, shooting my Nocturne at f1.5 means if it's even mildly sunny outside, you can't take the shot. Now I know you can buy ND filters, put ND filters on the front, but that kind of then, you lose the moment by the time you've fumbled through your bag and found a filter. So I do wish that maybe the shutter speed just went another stop faster, maybe 2,000th of a second. Now when it comes to the price of these cameras, big disadvantage is the entry to buying one of these is high. They're expensive cameras, they come with expensive lenses. From initially getting into the market, you need to really dive in deep. That is a problem, and that is a big disadvantage. Something that is quite good with these cameras is the value once you've purchased them. Both the cameras and the lenses, they all hold very firmly. The Leica M6 that I've got here, I just checked on eBay because that's where I bought it from, that I purchased this camera for £1,500. So it was £1,500 for the camera. It's in pretty much mint condition. It also came with its original box. I don't think you can pick this camera up now for anything less than about £2,000. So in the 2 years I've owned it, it's increased in value about £500. Now, let's say I did need to service this camera in my ownership. I haven't had to, but if I had, it probably wouldn't have come to £500. So this camera kind of paying for itself in a way that if I do need to replace anything, it's kind of covering it itself. But I do understand the entry to buy these cameras is very high, and it puts a lot of people off straight away because there are better cameras out there for that money. Now another downside to this camera, and it's kind of relevant for quite a few film cameras really, and any sort of manual camera, is that nobody really can take photos of me with it. I've got so many photos of all of my friends and family, but there's almost no pictures of me taken with this camera, and I love the way this camera renders images, but it just means that I don't have any of myself really. Another one as well, and it's all to do with it being a rangefinder, is the fact that the close focusing distance on these cameras is pretty rubbish. The rangefinders themselves will only focus down to 70 centimeters. There's a few lenses that do focus a bit closer, like 50 centimeters on some of the Voigtlanders, but you can't focus them through the actual rangefinder, so you're just guessing. From a travel point of view, I do find myself quite often wanting to take quite close-up images of things, and you just can't do it with this. So then with all that in mind, what do I think about this camera? Do I regret purchasing it 2 years ago? And the answer to that is absolutely not. I love this camera. I'm going to continue to shoot it all of the time. The images that it produces are some of my favorite images, and the enjoyment it gives me in terms of the process and the actually taking the shots is worth every penny to myself. Is it a perfect camera for most people? No. Is it a perfect camera for me? In many cases, no it's not, but for the sort of photography that I do, and when I'm trying to shoot photos for just enjoyment, there's not a camera out there that I'd rather be using than this Leica M6. If you've enjoyed this video, please do not forget to like and subscribe. We're on our way to 2K subscribers. We're almost there as well. It took me nearly 3 years to get the channel from 0 to 1,000 subscribers, and it's going to have taken nearly 3 months to double that to get it to 2,000. The support recently has been so good, and if you've watched a couple of my videos and you've not hit that subscribe button yet, please consider hitting it, as I'd love to have you along for the journey. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Cheers!